these artificial intelligence softwares are getting very good. Like I was able to just create this entire background with a single prompt. I didn't even have to design this bush, it just appeared. Okay, enough shenanigans. Let's actually go into today's topic, which is gonna be quite complex, um, but it's something which I feel is very needed in today's society, and it's how do we as a society negotiate the social contract. Now, what is a social contract? Basically, a social contract is a philosophical idea that started 500 centuries ago, that is the unwritten rules that we the people, we the society, all choose to agree with. You can't choose not to be in a social contract. By the existence of living in a society, you're living in a social contract. Now, in the real world, many social contracts exist. The social contract is never defined, it's always ambiguous, it's always changing. But you can't choose to not care about the social contract. Basically, it's that quote, you may not care about war, but war cares about you. You may not care about the social contract. You may never have signed it. You may never have agreed to it. You may never have voted for it to change. You may never have agreed with the people that change things. But it will affect you. So you don't have. So individually, you may think that you may not. You don't need to care about the social contract. But the social contract will exist, and the rules within it will always be continue to be defined, and specifically will be changed by people. And if you're not sitting at the table, you will still be affected by the change. So let me give a good example of this, which is I always like to think about pension systems as a good foundation of understanding a lot of society. And in the conversation of pensions, there's a lot of podcasts you can listen to. I personally like Everything is Everything with Amit Verma, that explains it in India, but it applies to every other society. But for my example, I'm going to use Sweden. So Sweden's one of the best countries in the world that has solved their pension problems. They don't really have future embedded growth obligations compared to other countries. What does it mean for society to solve this problem? So I'm going to use Sweden in this specific example, but just think of every other country in the world as being worse than Sweden. So Sweden passed a pension reform in 1990. So that's about 30 years ago. That basically drew a line in the sand that created three categories of people: people born before 1979, and people born after, and another category of people born, I think, in before 1950. So basically, if you were born before 1971, you were on a defined benefit, but if you were born after that, you were on a defined contribution. Those words are complicated, but for this conversation, we can just define it as the rules of the system changed for the people that were born after 1979, and the rules are different for the people born before. Now, the way the system works is the law was passed 30 years ago. The consequences of the law aren't felt in society, aren't fixed in society until maybe 1940. So basically, until everyone born before 1979 are dead, there's an overhang in society. So just to make this clear, the problem was fixed 30 years ago. The social contract was changed 30 years ago. But it still continues to affect the society, the taxes, all of those for maybe another 20 years. So for the whole 50 years. And this is very important to understand, which is as systems change, even when systems change to fix things, like in this example, The fixes of society are never quick, they're never immediate. Even the right steps in the right direction takes time to move through the entire system, kind of like a python digesting uh, an animal it caught. It takes time for systems to change. Um, but this is very important to understand because, with the Swedish example, if you were born before 1979 and if you were born just a year later, the rules of the system are completely different. What it means to be a worker and be taken care of is very different by a single year. The so basically the playing field, the game, is completely different. Now most of society don't pay attention to the actual fine print of the laws. We don't live in a world where we live on mimesis and beliefs of what other people around us say, and we just do those things. So when the rules of the system change, if you're not paying attention, as the social contract changes, if you were not paying attention or if you were not part of the decision, you will not adapt to it. So this is kind of like an example of, in certain countries you see this, where the first one generation of doctors is very rich, and then the next generation of doctors can't even afford to live without roommates. Those changes often happen in a single generation, and that's often because the social contract or other laws basically changed. A good example I can give is, there's a very good interview of a nurse from India that moved to the UK, and she was asked, "Did you move to the UK because you could make more money?" And she said no. She said she was making more money back in India, and but she still preferred her quality of life in the UK. Now that's a very interesting conversation to me, because I don't think she's lying. Salaries in India in certain parts have gone up a lot, so she probably was making more money in India, but the quality of life was worth enough that she would earn less absolute dollars to just be in the UK. If you're somebody that bought into the shared social contract in the UK, and you thought you would compete against people who were who just would be fine with your quality of life, and the social contract changes where somebody else is willing to do the same work just because the society is more peaceful, that that's something that affects everyone. So this is just a good example of, if even though you may not want the social contract to change, you still need to be aware and pay attention to it. So now I'm going to go on a diversion into a conversation that I don't know how long it's going to be, so just follow me through. I swear it's worth it. We're going to come back to the social contract, but the global social contract. But I want to start talking about the Indian social contract, and especially my experience with it. So I grew up in India. I had a pretty typical childhood where I could see the social contract that I was a part of. In a sense of, the Indian social contract it varies in different parts of India, but there's always and most of it is never put into words, but it's decisions are not made in the individual level, it's made at a family level. Your own individual desires don't matter as much as caring about the family group as a unit. Kids don't ever become independent, they depend on their parents up till the age of 30 or even older. They don't often live alone, they live with the family. The family has a say in the marriage of the child. In some parts of India, when kids earn their first salary, the parents get it and then they pass it to their kids. In other parts, the kids earn their salary and they send money to their parents back home, etc., etc. There are many different versions of it. It's almost like different areas and different socioeconomic classes have different versions of it. And I personally, I grew up in it. I saw this as my future, you could say. And I personally didn't want it. I think one of the things that got me into not believing I wanted a social contract was when I was 16. I started going to the gym. I started basically prioritizing my health, and I basically realized that I was right in my worldview, and I didn't want to be resentful as everyone else around me called me stupid. So basically, I started going to the gym. I quit carbs. I started running. I won the state powerlifting competition. I started sleeping 8 hours. Like all of those things which are like obvious. I basically did that, and my family, my entire culture basically was like, oh yeah, Jeremy, just being stupid. He has no idea what he's talking about. And I was like, wait, do I really want to be a part of a social contract where I'm being called stupid for caring about my health, and 10 years from now I'm going to have to pay the health bills of people who are eating snacks in front of the TV? Ew, I don't want that. That doesn't sit right. I don't like that, because I'm choosing to actually do the right thing, which is walk every day, and the other people around me not only aren't doing that, they're calling me stupid for doing that. That is not a good deal. Alright, so I it built up this resentment in me that I was starting to wonder, like, what am I doing? Like, right answers exist. There's no world where we have to act like the obese people in the room aren't full of shit. So I was like, wait, walking works. But everyone around me is acting like walking doesn't work, and they're calling me stupid for believing walking works. Alright, this and then I think back then I basically got this idea into my mind, which is a take on no taxation without representation. I would say no welfare without shared reality, which is you can't have a familial or societal welfare system unless you have a shared reality. And for me, I realized I wasn't going to have a shared reality. So I had this resentment built up when I was like very young, at the age of 16, and it basically exploded when I was 18. So when I was 18, it wasn't health anymore. I was deciding to drop out of college to build businesses on the internet and travel the world. And by that moment, I was like, yeah, fuck it. We're not going to be able to have a conversation. I just got to renegotiate my social contract. So I spent my entire childhood seeing other social contracts. I've watched enough Hollywood movies to see the caricature of the social contract of in America being the kid at 18 years old leaves home and never get any money from his parents. And I was like, nah, okay, that's a good deal. So basically, when I was 18, my family wouldn't kick me out. They are like, my mom loves me. She's a very nice person. But I had to be the one who enforced that social contract. So basically, I wanted the American social contract, not because that was the easiest way I could get what I wanted out of life. So basically, that's what I did, which was at the age of 18, I basically told my parents that, alright, this is not working. We need to sit down. We need to have a discussion. We need to completely renegotiate what it means, what is our relationship. I told them that I don't want any of their money, that I can sign whatever document they want that basically says I'm not entitled to anything from them, and I'm just going to do my own things, and I'm not going to take any money from them. And that's basically what I did at the age of 18. I just decided, if I want to renegotiate my social contract, I need to be the one to do it, because nobody else in the world is going to do that for me. Another way of saying this is, the word codependency has the word co, which means it's two people. So if you're in relationships where you believe that the other person is codependent, you can still end it. You can independently choose to cut things off on your end and end that codependency. And that's basically what I did. I renegotiated my childhood social contract into a brand new contract that worked for who I was as a person. And part of the thing with this conversation is I want, like, I understand when many Asians or Indians tell me the issues they have with their parents, which is they tell me all the negatives that come from having Asian parents. But very few people want to solve it today, because there is a way to solve it, which is, if you believe the American social contract is better, leave home at 18, take no money. You actually do solve it in 2 years like that. But if you believe nobody can do that, you're never going to be the first person to do that. Now, I was the first person to do that. I didn't take any money, which is why today I don't often take shit from that many people, because I don't have to act like there's some ambiguity about what can be done and what can't be done. They are like absolute facts and they are absolute certainty. Like I said, walking works. Let's not act like the obese people are relevant. So then it made me understand two specific words which are very, very important for the social contract, and which I'm going to bring up here, which is arbitrary and negotiation. So far, the conversation has been based on logic, that yes, it's obvious, this contract, that contract, but most of the world doesn't work on logic. It works on arbitrary factors, which is, if you look at the world and search for rationality, you're not going to find it, because a lot of what we do ends up being, the reality of what we end up doing ends up always being arbitrary solutions. For example, what does it mean to be an adult? Why do we pick the age 18? There's nothing logical about it. We could use the frontal lobe is only developed by the age of 22-25, and that increases it. Or we could use the some people are smarter by X amount of age, so we should do a morality test every 5 years or every 5 months and decide if somebody is an adult. So there's nothing real about what we decide as society, as our rules. It's often cultural plus arbitrariness. So if you're trying to build societal rules from first principles, you're going to fail, because nothing about society is based on logic. It's arbitrary. So how do you decide on where do you draw the line? For most of society, especially in the Western world, we've decided that 18 is the line. Why? Doesn't matter. That is the line. So we just pick that because so we have a line. Is it arbitrary? Yes. And different cultures have different things. That's why Americans drink at 21 while Germans drink when they are born. So the solutions that we do end up actually implementing will always be partially arbitrary. And then the second idea is negotiation. Now, if you're emotional, if you've got an emotional IQ, if you have half a heart, you probably think I'm an asshole in the first part of this, where I say that I've negotiated my familial social contract because I didn't want to be a part of that system. You're probably going to say something like, how can you ever square yourself? How can you ever pay back somebody in monetary terms for bringing you into this world? How can you ever put a dollar amount on somebody being by your bedside when you were sick at 5 years old? Or the David Graeber, I think Debt, from the book Debt, of what does it mean to be square with your society, that you can't ever pay back, that you can't ever thank your society for what you've got. Those are true, we get that. But the reason you finally settle on a number or a arbitrary point is to bury the hatchet, to move on, to open doors to a different contract that we can all move past, and we don't have to continue to negotiate things There's another solution to working on the social contract that a few of my friends have done, which is it's a bit like avoiding fights in a relationship, like just letting them be under the surface, like never being vocal about what the social contract actually is. Just keep, like, don't really have any beliefs. Like, we don't know, like, we don't actually know how people lose weight, so like telling people to go walk is, it's mean. Like, we're not going to accept beliefs like that. Or yeah, we don't know what's like, you are born into this culture, so you just have to accept it. And you're not supposed to say how the culture works out loud, because by making things verbal, you're ruining the vibes. Just feel the energy, bro. Now that's one of the solutions that many people do, is just avoid the problem, like never bring it up to the surface. um, I have a story from, and I call basically that idea half a shared reality, which is, you might watch a video like this, you might agree with everything I say, but you're like, yeah, I don't actually want to be that direct. I don't want to tell my parents that, yeah, I'm not going to have like, we're not going to have a shared life together or whatever. That's a bit too extreme, Jeremy. Don't you think? Don't you think that we can like just like let it go, like ignore it, just put it in the future? And I have a friend that had the version of this where um, he started and he entered my world. Like, started working online, started traveling, started building his own business. Was like one of the first in his families to start a business. Um, and I remember he started doing that, and he basically did what I just said, which is he was like, "Oh yeah, social contract, relationships. Let's not deal with it. Let's put it for the future. Let's not think about it. I mean, life's good. Just relax by the beach. The sun's out. Um, let's have fun." And basically, he just ignored it, and he kept it in the shadows. And he worked on his business, and he basically didn't try to tell people that, oh yeah, I'm doing this thing, I'm very clear, I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to do my own thing. Instead, he was like, oh no, I might give this thing a try, it may not work, etc. And he didn't really have strong beliefs in what he was doing. He just looked at things as trials. The way many people look at the gym as something you try, and not like something that's obvious. And in that, what happened was he ended up being very successful. He built like very big businesses, and then he started caring about his health, like started exercising and stuff. And his family didn't. And then his someone in his family said, "Oh yeah, I got an operation. Here, pay my medical bills." When that happened, he had this like massive anger, because he remembered just 2 years ago that the person was calling him stupid for starting a business. The person said he was out of his mind. The person, and then they want him to pay their medical bills. Are they out of their goddamn mind? Like, because by this time he was like, yeah, they don't care about your health, and they called me crazy, and they want me to pay their medical bills. What the fuck? So basically, he just kept this every part of the relationship ambiguous. It wasn't clear. There were no rules of engagement. It's just family. You don't define things very right. And I think that serves a purpose. Like, I do understand why that exists. Like here's an example. If India has a social contract where the entire family is socialized, America has it where it's basically anarcho. The moment you're 18, now it's changing, but for the most part, the moment you're 18, you're your own independent person. We are not going to care that much about you. And Europe is somewhere in between. So and every other country around the world has a different version. So it's not that this is good, that is bad. It's this whole thing goes along a spectrum, and you can pick somewhere along the spectrum. You don't have to go to the biggest extreme. Most people, I believe, will settle somewhere around the European, where it's you support each other and stuff like that. But the thing that he fought against, that put resentment in him, wasn't the dollar amounts. It was the, of course, obligation part of it. It was that they looked him dead in the eye and said, yeah, of course you got to pay this. Like it was his responsibility, it was his responsibility to do that. And that is the conflict here. The conflict often arrives when we have half a shared reality as a society, and we're forced to pay things that we know are unfair. We can apply this now that we have these backstories. We can apply this logic to every aspect of society. It doesn't matter if we are talking about people that are net negative contributors to anything productive in society by working in the NGO-cracy, or if it's basically the defense of means testing welfare systems. All of these ideas, whether it's understanding the difference between defined contribution and defined benefit in pensions, or why what does it mean to be a net contributor to society, like once you move to it. All of these ideas are things that if you don't bring them up to the surface, if you're just having emotional political conversations, if you include people on economics that don't do maths, like that can't do fifth grade arithmetic because they're just reading quick headlines followed by knee-jerk reactions against the other side. If you live in that world, what you basically end up doing is in being in this hell of a thing where you know that you're paying for structures or societies where you aren't, where basically you're almost being stolen from. And when you see that, you have this resentment in you that's like, it just builds up and builds up and builds up, and it comes out in different valves of society, always in extremism. And it's understandable. If you don't say that it's understandable, you're probably not paying attention to the actual inefficiencies and parasitical structures in our societies. And because we assume everyone is too like everyone around us assumes this about everyone else, that hey Jeremy, yes, you're doing this long podcast, but yeah, I can listen to your podcast, but my friend, yeah, he's not that smart, so we need to only share simplified ideas with him. We can't have this complex competition. Fuck that. Like, get out of here with those stupid mentalities, because what people often do with these ideas, and I've heard this 100 times, when people use that excuse for other people, what they're actually doing is using it for themselves. What they're actually doing when they say shit like that is, yeah, Jeremy, what you're doing right now, that level of intensity, yeah, I can get along with that. But if you go a bit further, I can't. So I need to tell you not to be, not to go further than that. So by using this other person, it's a coping mechanism from people to not going further. You see this in health often, where people are often stuck in like middle ground ideas of like, yeah, I go to the gym and I'm healthy. Like this is good enough, and it's like, but yeah, this other person, we need to get them to go to the gym, and it's like, yes, but you can still do more. So basically it's the same idea here, which is we assume other people can't have intelligent conversations, and in that we aren't the ones to make the conversations that we are intelligent. We are not the ones to say that, okay, yes, we can expect more courage from more people. We can push things towards people recognizing truth in conversations, so there's no ambiguity, and we can exclude the people who are not being productive to the conversation. So to sum all of this up, which I don't know if I can, but I hope you get something useful from it, is I do think the things we need to actually negotiate the social contract, or any social contract better is, one, understand that different social contracts exist around the world, and different people want different social contracts. Some people want more of a socialized family, some people probably want less. Some people want more socialized communities. Some people want less. The more you travel, the more you understand that different people will probably fit in different social contracts. So let multiple social contracts flourish. Let's not try and believe we all need to have a single one. Two, truth exists, and we don't need to be shy to just say that it's certain ideas are better. Growing up in India, it was very obvious with health that everyone only their ideas on of health exist in this middle wavy nobody knows anything world, because people just didn't want to do obvious things. And for me, I just don't accommodate that, and I think that's often a coping mechanism from not going further yourself. So obvious solutions exist. We don't include, like, in pensions we only include people in the conversation who understand the difference between defined benefit and defined contribution. If they don't understand the difference in those two topics, we sit down with them, we talk to them, get them up to speed in what those two things mean, and then have an intelligent conversation around those things. We don't try to have the conversation of what one politician says versus the other. All right, we exclude the illegible, the unintelligent conversations. Three, the final solutions will always be arbitrary and will be based completely on negotiations, because they aren't objective right answers. Four, the social contract is never signed, it's never agreed upon, it just happens. How do you know when a social contract has happened? You just feel it, the vibes have shifted. That's what it means to live in a different social contract. Five, the contract will never continue to exist unless a society enforces it. A society that doesn't maintain its culture, that doesn't maintain its habits, can't have a social contract, because the contract doesn't survive. Like, it's never completely defined precisely in laws, it's defined in culture more in laws. So if a culture disappears, you have two options, which is renegotiate a new contract for the new culture, or codify the old cultural practices in laws so that they can be enforced. And six, help individuals escape or build new social contracts, so that once they are in their own personal social contracts, they can build their own community social contracts, and then we can help a societal contracts. That's personally the way I try to approach it, which is I don't start from the top down. I believe that you can help individuals first, that can then build communities, and then we can try to think about solving it, because I don't really know how we solve the global social contract. It's so complex. But personal contracts, that's relatively easy. Still complicated, but easier. And then finally, no social contracts without shared reality. Let's start there. Jeremy out.